Hello, and welcome to the second episode of the Scrimshaw Show. My name's Evan Scrimshaw. Glad to be doing this on this Friday morning. Shockingly, I think everybody knows what this podcast is going to be about. It's about Virginia. I was going to write a column about this last night, and then the column writing process didn't really go very well. But everyone is freaking out about this Fox News poll of Virginia, so I think I'm just going to talk about it for a little bit. Normal podcast service, again, will not be the solo podcast. I'll usually record something more planned with a guest, but everyone's panicking about Virginia, so we might as well take advantage and, just get a podcast out for everyone panicking and dooming about the chances of Terry McAuliffe losing and Glenn Youngkin winning. Follow me on Twitter at eScrimshaw. Follow the Scrimshaw Show on Twitter at Scrimshaw_show. Before we get into it, and yeah, that's all I really got. Let's just get into this poll. Yeah, Fox is wrong, guys. Like, Glenn Youngkin might win. I really, 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 really don't think he's going to, and I'll explain why in a second. But, Fox is wrong. If you have a Trump voting electorate in a Biden plus 10 state, you've fucked up. You have fucked up in a very real and substantial way, and pretending that there's some logic to illogical and wrong polls is exactly how I got 2020 wrong. We can spend as much time as we want talking about the demographic screen and everything else, or we can accept a very basic fact, which is state polls in the U.S. are terrible. There were 16 well-polled governor's races in 2018 with more than 3-point polling misses. 14 of those 16 undersold the party that won that state in the 2016 presidential election. At some point, we have to reckon with the fact that the polls in Montana and Missouri last year were close for the governorship, and both were massive, comfortable Republican wins. At some point, we have to reckon with the fact that state polls have been a less reliable indicator than a basically partisanship-based regression from a national environment, and we have to reckon with the fact that there's no evidence the national environment is disastrous for Democrats. Let's be very, very clear about this. If this is a tied race, let alone Youngkin by 8, which, I mean, is just laughable nonsense. If Youngkin loses by a point, the GOP are Senate favorites. Straight up, they are. They will win one of Arizona and New Hampshire, even if Sununu doesn't run. In a universe in which Glenn Youngkin even gets within 2 points, the GOP are having such a good night in 2022 that they will win not only the House, they'll probably win 225, 230 seats in the House, 51, 52 Senate seats. I'd only say Georgia would probably still be Democratic because Herschel Walker sucks that much. But if they could run a competent candidate, they'd probably win that too. I mean, the national polls don't have this. YouGov's a D6 generic ballot, and Morning Consult's a D2. I mean, at some point we have to reckon with the fact that either something very specific is happening in Virginia, or the Virginia polls are wrong. Which is it? My gut says the Virginia polls are wrong because state polls are really bad. For everyone who has said, but it's Fox, right? Everyone has said the words. We all know what it is. Whatever you think of the news network, the polling, the polling arm is top notch. Is it? Is it really? Because these are the guys who had Biden plus 11 in Nevada 4 weeks out this year. These are the guys who had Joe Donnelly winning by mid-single digits in 2018. These are the people who had Doug Jones winning by 10 over Roy Moore. We've all said it because they were a favorable pollster for Democrats last year, so Democrats got in the habit of saying, whatever you think of the news network, the polls are good. Now, They're not a good polling firm, right? If you put out a Trump plus one electorate poll in 2021 in Virginia, like straight up, you just don't know what you're doing. It is an error so disqualifying as to render basically everything you say moving forward suspect. It is laughably bad. They're not hurting. I guess you can give them credit for not hurting. They're just wrong. They're just not correct. Now, okay, but every pollster that's released previous polls, all their most recent polls not herded, I don't want to say that, but like moved towards Democrat, or moved towards Glenn Youngkin over Terry McAuliffe. I mean, sure. And like, if you care about like reasonable, poll-based analytical modeling, Lack and Harmon have a good one. And they still show a D5. Like, the thing for me is just like, you shouldn't trust U.S. state polling. I'm not really saying you should trust national polling either, but you really, really shouldn't trust U.S. state polling. Like, we know U.S. polling misses are correlated to partisanship. We know that, polls in Ohio are much more likely to overstate Democrats, and polls in Virginia are much likelier to understate Democrats. Like, we know this. We know this from 2018. We know this from the fact that, Rob Cordray was the favorite. Like, I was looking at this randomly and just like, I was actually preparing to dunk on 538 here, but they had Roger Cordray favored in Ohio in 2018, and I was about to dunk on them for that opinion. And then I looked at all the polls, and so it's like, no, he was favored. Like, he was absolutely the favorite going into that, and then the polling miss came in. And what we're seeing is a bunch of people who have taken the wrong lesson from 2020. The actual lesson of 2020 is U.S. polling is broken, is fundamentally institutionally broken, and it does not matter what they say. You shouldn't care. The lesson that a lot of people have taken from that is, so we now need to, not believe good Democratic polls. No, we just need to not believe polls that say shit that's not true. Like, the Monmouth poll that I talked about last time was just not correct. It had Youngkin doing twice as well as Trump with non-degree whites. If you think that's possible, I would like to know what you're smoking and who your dealer is, because I need some of that. It's not true. If you think the electorate that's going to show up on Monday would have voted for Donald Trump, I would love to know what you're smoking. I would love to know what's wrong with you. Right? Why did Joe Biden's approval fall 13 points to Virginia in 2 weeks? It's not the bipartisan. It's not the not passing the bipartisan infrastructure bill, because that hadn't happened then either. It's not critical race theory, because again, the GOP have been talking about it for months. What is it? What caused a 13-point drop in Joe Biden's approval in one state in 2 weeks? Oh, nothing? You can't think of anything that would cause this? Huh. Shocking. Okay, so not that then. Okay. So Joe Biden's approval, if you take this Fox poll, is 13 points underwater in Virginia, which would be about a 23-point reversal from his 2020 margin to his current approval. His national change from those two places, 12 points. Why is Virginia 11 points more disfavorable to Joe Biden than the nation compared to the previous benchmarks? Got an answer for that? No? Yeah, it's probably state poll badness, right? It's just state polls are bad. Do we remember the, West Virginia Trump plus 18 poll? I remember it. It came out on, I think it was a Friday, and everyone on ET was just like, oh my God, this is the beacon, the siren call that, like, the landslide's coming, because Trump is underperforming in West Virginia by, I think that would have been 25 points compared to 2016, right? And everyone said the same thing. We all said the same thing, which was, even if the swing is only half of this, Missouri's in play, right? It's even if the polls are bad, like even if the polls are wrong, it can't be that wrong, can it? Yeah, it can be, right? I remember the Arkansas R+2 poll that came out in June, right? Just complete nonsense. Just complete nonsense. There was no point at any point was Arkansas within 20 points, right? And hell, if you want to talk about network polls, how's that ABC Washington Post Wisconsin poll sound to you? Remember that? Biden plus 17? He won by less than a point. I mean, I still think McAuliffe wins handily, but the reason I think McAuliffe wins handily is because I don't care what the polls say. My confidence in McAuliffe was never about the polls, therefore a polling change would never move my confidence, right? Could you argue it's more of an act of faith? Kind of, but the thing is that the theory that I am operating under is that not much has changed, and therefore a Biden plus 10 state will vote like a Biden plus 10 state, and McAuliffe won't win by the same margin, but he'll do pretty damn well. If you applied this theory to California, you would have been very correct in that, Gavin Newsom did exactly as well as he did in 2018. And California's state partisanship was exactly the same as it was in 2018. I'm not saying this to say that Democrats are going to similarly hit 2018 or 2017 benchmarks, but I mean, if the notion is that large-scale polling misses in Democratic direction are not possible, hi, California exists. Like, it just happened. It just happened last month. Am I as confident as I was 2 days ago, 3 days ago? Yeah. Because nothing, as I said at the end of the last podcast, nothing is going to change my confidence because nothing can happen from here on out that's going to make me change because I don't care what the polls say. Not caring what the polls say means that you don't change your mind because the polls change. Right? I don't know what U.S. polling has done to justify any amount of faith in it. I don't know what you're thinking to justify this faith. Half the time it's wrong. The other half, half of the other times, it's sort of close-ish, but that's on average. And frankly, in plenty of those situations, the number of polls is not exactly high. And even then, sometimes it's just errors cancel each other out, and the individual polls aren't necessarily very good themselves. But I don't know why we're supposed to believe these polls. I don't know what U.S. polling has done to justify faith. I saw someone respected on elections Twitter compare the moment that poll came out to the Ann Seltzer Iowa release. And I laughed because, oh no, that's not what this is. I stepped in front of the Ann Seltzer bus once. Never going to do it again. Literally will never do that one again. I learned my lesson in Canada, right? My Quebec projection, I had the Liberals gaining a bunch of seats in Quebec going into the election last month. And then Leger came out with their final Quebec poll, and I was just like, nope, I'm not stepping in front of that bus. And if Ann Seltzer wanted to go, if Ann Seltzer was doing an Iowa poll for this, then yeah, I wouldn't step in front of that bus either. But no. Fox News doesn't deserve that treatment. Fox News does not deserve that benefit of the doubt. Frankly, no non-Ann Seltzer pollster deserves that benefit of the doubt in the U.S. If you believe the polls in California, you think you have to believe that the polls moved 25 points. 23 points, technically, if we're going to be precise here, in a month. The 538 average was recall, was Newsom or no, or whatever the formal term is, but the Newsom campaign was up by less than a point with a month left. He won by 24. If you believe that happened, genuinely, I would like to know. I would genuinely like to know in what universe you think that's true. What happened there was very, very simple. What happened there was Democrats were always going to win by roughly the margin they won by, and the poll tightening was basically a mirage. It's the same here. If I'm wrong about Youngkin, I'm wrong about Youngkin. But bad polls are not the reason to believe Glenn Youngkin has a chance. Fundamentals still show this is very likely to be a McAuliffe win. It's a blue state. The national environment, such as it can be ascertained, looks fine. Yes, by 538's partisanship metric, there has been some tightening of state legislative special election, or some GOP trend in state legislative special elections since I think it's sometime in June. But that trend is both patchy, but also very partisanship is also key there. Democrats tend to be doing better in Democratic areas. The New Hampshire special election this week, where we outran the Biden baseline pretty substantially. The Bedford, New Hampshire gain, the Iowa, I think it was the Iowa Senate race, state Senate seat, the one that was up. It's the Iowa race that was up on the same night as the Newsom recall, where we beat the 2020 margin. And Democrats are getting creamed in rural and Republican trending areas. And also we lost that one Connecticut seat, which that is sort of the one outlier to this. But, again, we're also dealing with something resembling, tiny samples here. If you want to make the case for Youngkin outside of the polls, it's Republican enthusiasm is through the roof, Democratic enthusiasm is down, and basically Democrats don't care enough to vote in this race. Maybe. I'm not arrogant enough to rule it out concretely, but I don't buy it. The only poll that has shown substantial Biden-Youngkin movement is this Fox News poll. That's it. It's the only one. Every other poll says ticket splitting is functionally non-existent. And if ticket splitting is functionally non-existent and Democrats turn out, they're going to win. The polls that don't have a sizable or clear McAuliffe lead are presuming a turnout fall. They're presuming that massive differential turnout operation. And I just plainly think that's not going to happen. I think betting on Democrats not to turn out is probably not a good idea. And at the end of the day, even in that Fox poll, white, educated, well-off social liberals trended left compared to the poll at large. There is no massive, concrete movement of educated, well-off, white social liberals right. There is not this mythical suburban reversion. And without that, and without the GOP doing massively better with non-degree whites than even Donald Trump managed, or, again, the GOP could always win because they actually get 18% of the black vote, the sort of mythical, but the GOP could finally get black, could finally break 9% of, with black voters. Yeah, maybe that comes true. Maybe. I mean, this is going to really sound bad when he somehow does win 20% of black voters, and I sound like an absolute fucking moron, but, I know I got caught with Hispanics last time. Glenn Youngkin's not winning, not winning that amount of black voters. You can believe the polls if you want. You can panic about the polls if you want. Your actual response to that should just be to phone bank or get out the vote if you live in Virginia. I'm not worried. I'm not worried because there's no reason to worry, right? I did the same thing in 2020, but the opposite way, right? I looked at all those close Montana polls and all those close South Carolina polls, and I looked at. Yeah, we didn't get too many close Kansas polls by the end, but I certainly looked for them, right? And the thing is, that data was shit. It was abhorrently bad. But the problem was it was from good pollsters, so I believed it. I believed it because I wanted to believe it. I wanted to think Lindsey Graham could lose. Straight up. U.S. polling doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt, and way too many people are willing to give it to them. They don't. Terry McAuliffe is still favored in Virginia. If he loses, throw this back at me. I don't give a damn. If he wins by 8 or more, Democrats should be elated. 5 to 8 doesn't really tell us much about the midterms. 5 to 1, 5 to 2, 5-point win to a 2-point win. GOP are clearly hedge favorites at this point, and I'll officially change that particular race rating or whatever. I will declare them as favorites, and if it's closer than 2, or God forbid Youngkin wins, the GOP are Senate favorites, and frankly, every Democrat should be extremely, extremely mad at everybody. Senate Democrats, House Democrats, Biden, Pelosi, McAuliffe, everybody. I don't think that's going to happen. I genuinely don't. I'm still on D8 because D8 was never about the polls. I do not think using polling in the United States of America is worthwhile anymore. I fundamentally do not. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I'm actually going to learn the lesson of 2020. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Scrimshaw Show. Follow me on Twitter at eScrimshaw. Follow the Scrimshaw Show on Twitter at Scrimshaw_show. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. Read everything I write over at scrimshawunscripted.substack.com. And I'm going to tease this now. I wrote a book. I've actually written a few in lockdown this year. And on December 1st, the book's going to be out. I'm going to drop the pre-order link on next week. But yeah, I wrote a novel. And apologies in advance, but I'm going to shill my novel a bunch. Because if y'all want to buy it, that would be pretty damn cool. But anyways, thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Scrimshaw Show. Have a great Friday. Have a great weekend, everybody. And I'll probably record something either with a guest or just solo when we know the results in Virginia. But I'm sticking with McAuliffe by 8. Have a good weekend, everybody.